Okay, hi everyone. I'm hoping all of our attendees are here. I see that we have a lot of people in this room. So, woo, 164, amazing. So, welcome to our session on Soundtrap. We're going to start right away because we have a lot to cover. This is Soundtrap from the ground up. And this is going to be a really exciting session, I hope, for all of you. And one of the cool things is going to be, hopefully you'll be experiencing this in the same way that my students get to experience this when they work with me. So we'll jump right in. So a couple of things that I want to just start with. My mantra always as a teacher is to work smarter, not harder. I think we all work way hard enough. And so here are some systems that I personally put in place in my own classroom to link Soundtrap up so it's easier for me as a teacher to work with my students. So the first one is if you have any programs like G Suite or Google Classroom or any other systems, Soundtrap works with many of the ones that you might be using in your classroom. Some additional outside of Soundtrap resources that I like to personally use are Edpuzzle. I load all of the videos I use with my students as tutorials into Edpuzzle directly, so that way students can have multiple choice questions throughout the video to kind of keep them on track and to guide their learning. It also serves as another great assessment tool for myself as a teacher. I use Berkeley Pulse, and I also use LKR's Jam Zone in addition to that. So those are some of the resources I use. Okay, so this is going to be the very first one of our polls that we try. So this is a poll that I'd like us all to do. I'd want you to rate your comfort level using DAWs, standing for Digital Audio Workstation. So you could be terrified, nervous but interested, neutral, like meh, excited, or I could do this in my sleep during a global pandemic. If you're there, you should be on this side. All right. Edpuzzle, great. Oh, I see a lot of people are saying hi. Hi, Christy. Okay. I love that you love my backdrop. Okay. Thank you for letting me know I'm muted. I'm just going through the chat. And I love how people are telling me where they're from. We're actually going to do a poll in a little bit so we can kind of get all of that into one place. So I'm going to end the poll. It seems like most of us are a little nervous, but excited, which is wonderful. All right, very cool. So if you're nervous and excited, you're in the exact right place. So my second poll that we're going to start with is, I want to know today, what are you most excited to learn about Soundtrap? So we have a lot of nervous, excited people, but specifically, what are we most excited about learning? So today we're going to go over some things like scaffolding and sequencing our lessons, some basic features like Soundtrap 101, crash course, how do you make things happen, right? Layering tracks, automation, which might be something, even if you've used Soundtrap before, you might not be as familiar with. It was something that I know for myself was pretty new. We have some really great lessons today. You're going to leave here with at least 7 solid go-to lessons that you can use with your students that are proven. They work. They work with middle schoolers. They could track younger. They could track older. And also, I'm really big on this. I am a routines and systems person. Again, I like to work smarter, not harder. So any kind of system we can set up to make things easier for ourselves and also easier for our students who are navigating a brand new space, oftentimes without us being there to physically hold their hand, at least not without a lot of hand sanitizer. Okay, and so I'm going to end the poll and let's see where we're at. Okay, so a lot of us are really interested in scaffolding lessons, which is great. It also seems like a lot of us need to learn some basic features, so we're going to spend a little bit of extra time on that at the front end, just making sure everybody feels comfortable on how to move forward. And yeah, we have some really great lesson ideas for your students to be composing and creating projects right away. So very excited. Those are our top 3 ones. Okay, so, yep. Yes, Eric, there is a lot of ducking off going on. Very fun. Okay, inside joke for those of you who have been to Summit before. So again, today you're going to leave here with a working knowledge of DAWs and an in-depth knowledge of how to use Soundtrap. That is my number 1 goal. By the end of the session, you should all feel comfortable creating at least 1 project, or ideally more, in Soundtrap without kind of having that fear of it. You are also going to leave here with an entire curriculum. You're all getting a free curriculum map. Woo! Save you some work. And in it includes lesson plans, resources, tutorials to get your Soundtrap program up and running. In addition, all of the videos I use with you today, you have my express permission to use with your students. So if you're like, I really don't feel like creating a beginner Soundtrap video to share with kids because that's a lot of work and it's hours of editing, congratulations, you get it for free. You'll also get some really great suggestions for those routines and structures you can use with your students. And I'm going to share some of my own students' feedback as well as my own as a teacher on what some of the benefits and challenges of Soundtrap are in the classroom. Finally, we're going to end with some great troubleshooting strategies for what to do when things don't work. Because guess what? Things don't work. And I want to start with a suggestion right now. Most of you are probably using some sort of Chrome browser, but in my experience, Chrome tends to work really, really well with Soundtrap. Sometimes Safari and other browsers get a little iffy. So just a suggestion, if you already are using Soundtrap or if you're about to use it for the first time, that's one I typically use with my students. If something doesn't work in Safari, try it in Chrome. I don't know why, but it works. Okay, so a couple things about who I am, and I know I see a lot of you writing in the chat, writing in the chat who you are and where you're from. My name is Catherine Plichta. I go by Katie to my friends. I'm a graduate of New York University and Empire State College, and I've worked in the New York City department for 11 years. This will be my 12th year as a teacher. I was a quarterfinalist in the 2016-17 Grammy Awards. I currently teach concert band, orchestra, modern band, music tech, choir, and everything online for as long as it'll be online. I'm also a New York City arts facilitator, so I know I have some of my members in here right now. I already have seen some of our New York City folks are here, and so I get to lead professional development around the city. And I've also worked as a New York City ambassador for Little Kids Rock, and I've been a presenter and trainer since 2015, so I've been doing this for a while. I had the amazing privilege to get certified as a Soundtrap educator, so I am super excited to share what I've learned from that, and also what I've learned from making a lot of mistakes, because one of my biggest things in my last couple of years as a teacher is for my students to not be afraid of making mistakes. I can't have that fear either. So we're going to kind of just jump in right now. I see so many people right now going through, no, sorry, Chris, I can't go back and reset the poll. But I see so many people sharing where they're from that I know a bunch of you are really excited to share that. So we're about to make a brand new poll. So here we go. This is my fun new thing. My question to you all is, what region, and we're going to break this down. I know some of you want to get really specific, but let's be a little general. What region are you from? And for those of you who have never had the privilege to serve on this platform, there's a really steep learning curve. So I'm going to tell you right now and be super upfront, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes on this, and that's totally okay because we want our students to do that too. And I know you are all amazing educators and you've been super supportive and kind and loving to me, and I thank you in advance for that support. Okay, so give me 1 second. We're going to just add our last other in because I always like to include an other. All right, here we go. What region are you from? Are you from the Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, South? I was joking with Zach, who, oh, by the way, Zach, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So I'm currently in Montana right now with my brother from another mother, Zach Harris, for those of you who know the amazing strings teacher next to me. He's helping me out a little bit on the back end. Midwest, South. I was wondering if there was a Mid-South. He laughed in my face and said no. Northwest, Southwest, or other. So if you're not from the States or you're from a different region that somehow got missed when we started this poll, please share that. So I see a lot of us are from the Northeast. Woo! Yes, Northeast. I ran away from you guys to get into the woods, but I'm coming home, maybe. We'll see how it goes. We got some Midwest here, Southwest, very cool. Hope you guys are all being super safe. We got some people from the South. We got 3% other. I always want to know, every year when we do stats for our school, there's always one kid who's checked the box for Eskimo. It's just one of our stat reports, and I always want to know who that kid is. I never know. Southwest, yes, here we go. And it seems like we have a pretty good cross section. So I'm going to end this poll in 3, into, I know there's a couple people who are like, I'm in Maryland. I don't know where I belong. I don't know. Choose a spot. It's fine. In one and end poll. All right. Yes. So we got some Midwest. We got some Southwest, Northeast, Southeast. All right. Very, very, very cool. Love it. So my wonderful teachers, let's move on. Oh, woo! That's right. Katie for the win. Christine, I love you. Christine, who is in the chat right now, is another co-facilitator of mine from the past. So thanks, girl. All right. So that was our lovely survey. I'm going to skip ahead. So here are the basics, and please feel free to use any or all of these slides with your students. I'm a big, if I've put the work in to make something, I am always about sharing it. So there you go. Yeah, somebody just wrote, Anne just wrote, you had me at free curriculum. For those of you who know me, I'm a big sharer, right? Sharing is caring. It can be fun. So all of the slides we're going to go through, they might look a little student facing. That's because they are. These are straight out of my classroom. So what is a DAW, right? I hate acronyms. So here's what it is. A DAW is a digital audio workstation, is an electronic device or application software used for recording, editing, and producing audio files. DAWs come in a wide variety of configurations, from single software programs on a laptop, think GarageBand, right, to an integrated standalone unit, all the way to a highly complex configuration of numerous components controlled by a central computer. Oh my God, that's too much information for me. Here's what it is. It's like GarageBand. It's anytime you can record, edit, or produce audio files, right? Regardless of the configuration, modern DAWs have a central interface that allows users to alter and mix multiple recordings and tracks into a final produced piece. And so when I go through this with my students, we do tend to spend a little bit of time talking about, well, what's a track? Well, what does a mix mean? Well, how do I layer things? And kind of go through the basics. We will get to that, so don't worry if you're like, I don't know. It's cool. That's where I started. We'll go through some of those things once we're in the actual Soundtrap platform, okay? All right, so here's what's really important to me. What are they used for? Why bother? I always ask myself that question, why bother? Well, DAWs are great for music production and recording, right? So I use them in my classroom if I want to record my students performing, back when we could do things like that. But also specifically, especially with remote learning, I use DAWs to create music, to have students record podcasts, to make speeches, and also to play around with sound effects, because I teach middle schoolers and sound effects are super fun, right? Who doesn't love a good fart noise? I do. So getting students comfortable with using technology, but doing it in ways that are fun and engaging, is something that I find Soundtrap to be a really useful platform for. Okay, so these are some of the things that we're going to do. And today we're going to be making some music and some podcasts. So yay! You'll get to see some examples of those. Okay, oh, and actually you'll get to see a soundtrack too, which is very cool. So this is my very, very first offer for you. So if this goes right, you'll get this in a second. So one of the things that I've always experienced as a teacher, the worst part of using any brand new platform is getting kids to log in, right? That's a big pain. And when you're trying to do it remotely, it's even harder. So guess what? I've done it for you. You are about to get your very own Soundtrap login instructions with every single step-by-step with words and pictures thing that you might need to do to get your kids hooked on this platform and making music right away. So if we go to offers, you should be able to see the one that says Soundtrap login instructions. So here we go. And if this works, if somebody can just type into the chat, yes, I see it. Because I really can't see what you're seeing. So somebody just type in that you got. Somebody wrote hallelujah. I hope that's because you just got it. Somebody, if you can just type yes, if you got the Soundtrap login instructions, that would be wonderful. They should show up in your offers. Okay. Mandy, I'd love to talk to your undergrads too. Okay. Oh, this is going the wrong way. Okay, yes, awesome, we have it. Wonderful, okay, awesome. So that should open in a new tab. So this is something that you can use with your students. This is the exact one I give my students. The only difference is in my version, I actually type in my email and I'll type in the EDU code. So if you go into Soundtrap as an educator, there are a couple different ways to add your students to your classroom. So I'm gonna just take a break for a second from our presenting in our slides just to show you what this looks like from the educator view. So here we go. Here's some screen sharing. And let's make it happen. Let's screen share this tire screen. Okay. Oh, is it coming up? This one. Okay, cool. All right, fabulous. You should see this in a second. All right, so this is the EDU version. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this because this actually is my EDU admin version on my Soundtrap account. But if I go here as an administrator, I can see all of the students I have within my class. So right now, out of 500 seats, I have 331, and I could go scroll down and I could see literally every single kid in my class, right? Which I'm sure is breaking tons of laws that you can see that. So let's go to my groups. And here's how I structure this. So this is one of the first systems that I really encourage you to do as an educator because this makes it way easier to find kids and sort kids. You also want to do this if you want to streamline your adding students to your classroom process. So if you look right here in my classroom, you can see I have 601 rock band, 602 orchestra, 603, and you can see all of the student numbers in each class, right? If I go over here, each different class has its own invite code. So if I wanted to streamline this and make this super easy, in Soundtrap login instructions guide, what you can do is you can just type that invite code directly into that guide, and then your students can join the exact class that they're supposed to join. I personally recommend this because I teach almost 400 students, as you can see. And so if I want to give my 7th graders an assignment that's different from my 6th graders, or if I want to be able to find a way to assess my students and have it be a little bit easier on my end, it does help to have all of the classes separated. And you can see I also have some electives in here. So my choir classes in here as another elective, and we do different Soundtrap work. So that's one of the best things I could just recommend from the jump is once you create your EDU account, just create those groups for your classes and then have your students join themselves. You can also, if you want to create a new group, you can go and make a new one, and then you can actually import your students from Google Classroom. I can't show you that right now without you seeing all my students' personal names and information, but there is another way to do that. So if I wanted to create a class, in fact, let me go to one that doesn't matter, go to this one. This is an outside organization. If I want to add users, I can click on add users. And again, I can either just have them type in the code, I can send them the link, or I can import directly from Google Classroom. So if I already have a class created in Google Classroom and I'm like, I don't want to type in all these names, that's a lot of work. You can literally just click that and it appears, which is super helpful information to know. Okay, so I'm going to end the share and let's go back. Yeah, it's somebody just wrote, yeah, thank you, Erin, for answering that question. It does end up being about $2,400 for 500 seats. I will share this. If you have other questions about Soundtrap specific stuff, Michael Bell is a wonderful resource and he has helped me out a lot. We've been doing it for free and currently our subscription goes till September 30th. And any teacher who is in this session right now can also have that extension till September 30th for free. And they're willing to work with schools about pricing. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask for help because they're really supportive of understanding the situation that most of us are in. All right, so let me jump back into our slides. And okay, cool. That's in Soundtrap. Why is that not appearing in my thing? Oh, I stopped that. Let me stop that for 1 second. Sorry, everyone. I'll just restart the slides. Wonderful. All right. So I went a little bit far. So let me back up for 1 second. All right, so at this point, you have your login instructions. So here's how this session is going to work. We're gonna go between the PowerPoint so you can kind of see it from the teacher-facing side into some videos that you can, again, use the exact same videos with your own students so you don't have to create them from scratch, or you can take ideas from those videos and make them yourself if you want to actually creating these things in Soundtrap. So one of the prereqs that I did ask everybody to do before the session was to create their own Soundtrap account. Now, if you haven't done that, if you click on the login instructions, there's instructions for teachers on how to create your own free version. So I'm going to ask you all to take about 1 minute right now and open up a brand new tab and log into your Soundtrap account. And again, if you do not already have a Soundtrap account created, to take a moment and just quickly create your EDU version of that account. And again, instructions are in that Soundtrap login platform. So I'm going to give us about 1 minute to open up a new tab and get started and move on. If for some reason there's an issue and you aren't able to engage with that, you are more than welcome to stay in this presentation the whole time, obviously. You can go back and read through the slides at a later time, and you can also take the opportunity to ask me some of the questions in the chat. We also will be stopping after every single assignment that I give to go through and answer questions that came up with assignments. So Anne just asked, can I use the one we used with Ronnie yesterday? Absolutely. You can use the exact same Soundtrap login if you already did this. I'm going to give us about 1 more minute. If you have a regular account, that's totally fine, Rebecca. Rebecca just wrote, I have a regular account. Is that okay? Or does it need to be EDU? Yep, for today, you can use whatever Soundtrap account you want. What I will say is if you go to do this with students, you do want to make sure that you're on the EDU specific platform. That is for legal reasons. If you're working with kids who are of a certain age, you want to make sure that they're in a walled garden. So, stalkers on the internet can't find them and hunt them down. So just really make sure that you're using the EDU version if you're doing that with students. I'm not sending out a code right now because you're not actually going to join any of my classes. I know that Ronnie had mentioned that he had wanted some people to join a code, but nope, you're just going to be in your own version of Soundtrap. Okay. Wonderful. Yep. So you're going to go to soundtrap.com/edu. That is also in the Soundtrap login instructions. Okay. So Rebecca just asked, is there a free EDU version or just the trial? So when remote learning started, they did go to an entirely free version. So many of us got to use it free for the year. Moving forward, it will go back to being paid. But again, Michael Bell at Soundtrap, he works on the EDU side and is really, really, really accommodating. He's just been wonderful. So I just have to suggest that you reach out to him. And if you need help reaching out to him, you're more than free to reach out to me. My email will be at the end of the presentation. Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're going to move into the first assignment. And again, we're going to go a little bit back and forth between some of the videos and actually giving you some time to work on Soundtrap. So since so many of us mentioned that we really want to learn how to use some of the basics. This whole video, I know it's a little long, but this is the one that I actually use with students. So I think it's really helpful just from a step-by-step guide to kind of learn how to be comfortable with Soundtrap. So here we go. We're going to move into our very first video, assignment number 1. Welcome to Soundtrap. We're going to start by entering the studio. Once we get inside the studio, the first thing we want to select is music, since we're going to be making our first song together. Now, as you notice, in the studio, on the right-hand side, there's 2 little circles. The green one is for collaboration. We can add a partner and work together. And the purple one are our loops. One of the things you want to do is make sure that you deselect anything already in the search, because that will limit what you can see. For us, we're going to start by beats, and we're going to select our very first beat. Now, I like to start with beats because I think that's a really good foundation for building any song, so I always suggest that my students start with that. If you notice that the bar on top is highlighted purple, please feel free to click it and deselect it. That's used to loop material of songs, but we're not going to be doing that today. So let's go back into our loop library and find a new instrument, like piano. Let's select piano, and we can listen to some different ones to see which one we might want to use in our song. Again, part of why I like starting with the beat first is to really think, okay, does this go with the groove of the piece, right? So once we find a piano loop that we really think will go with our beat, we can then click it and drag it directly into our studio, like so. And here we go. I think that sounds great so far. So let's zoom out so we can look at our entire song. Some other things to note, you can extend or shorten each loop by clicking the top right-hand corner of the loop itself and dragging it in either direction. If you want to start from a specific spot in your song, you can move the purple playhead to where you want to be, and then when you drag a new track in, just like I just did, it will sync to wherever that purple playhead is. I think this sounds pretty good so far, but I have decided that each of the piano loops are a little too long, so I'm going to go to the ends and shorten them by again clicking and dragging to the left, and then slide them over to where I want them. So if you can't tell from the vibe of this song that we're creating, clearly I am ready to be on vacation after all this remote learning. This definitely has a girl from Ipanema vibe. So let's find a bass line and see if we can add that into our recording. I think oftentimes bass is the unsung hero of most compositions, and I don't always choose it first, but I think that it's a great thing to add early on because it definitely does help establish that groove. So once we find one, we can drag it into the recording and see how it sounds all together. Again, if I only want to listen to a specific section of the song, I can move the playhead and start from wherever I want to. I think especially with starting with the first song, it's always great to add some extra percussion to really round out that section. So let's add some more percussion and see what it sounds like. One of the nice things about using pre-recorded loops is that you don't have to worry about any tempo issues. Another thing is that you can extend your song by adding different repeated sections of form, by just simply copying and pasting like you would in a Word document. I find this really useful when teaching form to beginners. Okay, awesome, everyone. So I'm going to stop the video there so that we can just take a sec to go through a couple of questions really quickly. Myra, don't worry. Don't worry about being lost. We're going to go through this together. I'm also going to give you some time right now to play around in the Soundtrap platform so you can actually experience some of the things that we just talked about. With the free version, you might be able to create classes, but you will also lose them in 30 days. So it kind of depends on how much time you spend on your program with Soundtrap to see how invested you want to be. Okay, so I'm gonna at this point just go through what the initial assignment I give students is, so you can just take a second to see how do I show my students how to kind of go through and learn how to play with Soundtrap, and then you're gonna have 5 minutes on your own right now to do that. And if you get lost, you can type into the chat and I'll be here to help you the entire time. So this is my very first assignment I ever give any students. I've done this for the last 3 years and it's worked like a charm every time. In fact, I always maybe over scaffold for them. They usually figure this out with a lot of the other scaffolds put in. So the first step is to log into Soundtrap. You should be logged in already from opening up that previous tab. And we're gonna make our first song. So we're going to use loops to create music. If you looked in that initial video that I showed you, when you open up your Soundtrap and you enter the studio, on the right-hand side, there's a little green circle and there's a purple circle. If you click on the purple circle, that's your loops library. And once you click on a loop, you can just simply drag it in. What I'd like you to do right now is to drag in a total of 4 loops. So you're just going to kind of layer them. So think house, right? We're going to build a house of loops. And you're going to stretch them out to be 16 bars. If you forgot from the video how to stretch it out, you can always go back and watch it again, or you can look in the top right-hand corner of each loop, and there's a little circle with an arrow. If you click that and drag, you can extend the loops or shorten them to whatever you need. So the goal of this assignment is that you have at least 4 tracks, that you have them in length to be at least 16 bars. And I always tell my students that you utilize the tracks in a way so that they enhance one another and don't compete. Oftentimes when students first do this, they go straight to percussion and are like, let's add in all the drums right now and make it really, really loud. I love this beat. It's so cool. That's awesome, but maybe not the most musical decision necessarily, right? So you kind of want to think, well, what makes this overall sound good? So at this time, I'm going to ask you to move to your Soundtrap tab, and you're going to have 5 minutes just to play around in Soundtrap, right? Find your loops, drag them in, make them 16 bars, whatever you want. You want to get really fancy, you're starting to get comfortable. You can kind of leave some spaces. You can add in additional tracks, but the minimum is try to get at least 4 tracks that last at least 16 bars and that they're used in a way that don't compete one another. So I'm going to take a moment right now. We have 5 minutes back at 5:32. Right? That's the time.
5:37.
5:37. Thank you. And we're going to kind of bring it back all the way together. Okay, so you have 5 minutes to work on creating your own tracks right now. And I'm here watching the chat. So at this time, if you're in Soundtrap and you get stuck somewhere and you need help, how do I find this? That would be a great way to ask me that question. Wendy just asked, how do we revisit your video? Great question, Wendy. So you can certainly email me and I'll send you the link. I do believe it also appears in videos on your end. If not, you can go back and rewatch the entire presentation. Every single thing we do in this presentation, you can go back and rewatch, including everything that's happening right now. And if you need additional videos or you're stuck with something else, again, my email will be at the end. I'm happy to send you anything. I am a sharer. Tanner asked, what grade levels do I use this with? I've used this anywhere from 6th grade all the way up to high school. Okay, great question, Jenny. So Jenny just wrote, how do I stop it from looping with the purple bar above the track? Jenny, if you click right on that purple bar and deselect it, you'll see it goes gray. When it goes gray, that means it's not going to continue to loop. Jenny also says, I don't have any loops. So Jenny, my question for you would be, what browser are you in? And or to check to make sure you're actually clicking on the loops icon, that's purple. Again, if you still need additional help kind of seeing what things look like in Soundtrap, no problem, Jenny. If you need help with that, you can always go back to that Soundtrap login instructions. Within that series of instructions that you got as an offer, it actually has the breakdown of how to go through step by step by step by step, including deselecting that purple bar that always throws my students off in the beginning. That's included in those instructions, so you can go through that. Okay. Brad asked a really great question. He asked, can you change the chord of a loop to make a chord progression? Sure, you definitely can. We're not going to go through that right now, but again, as you're playing around with this, try things out. You can click it. You're not going to break anything, right? Click as many buttons as you want. Try to modulate something. Try to change the key. Mess around with the tempo. Those are all great. Richard just asked, how do I delete a loop I don't want? You click on it and delete it. You can press the delete button. If you go to the left-hand side of where your loops are listed, the actual names on the loops, you'll see dots. If you click on that, you can delete the entire track. Victoria just said it keeps going to splice and paying. I'm wondering if that means price and paying. I'm not quite sure of your question, Victoria. If you can ask that again. I'm going to try to come back to you in a minute. Okay, and we're going to bring this all back in about 1 minute. So Jenny just said, I can't figure out how to push pause to stop the track from playing. So you can do this a couple of ways depending on your computer. Personally, on my computer, you can actually use the space bar to press pause, which is a great tool. It definitely makes it easier to use. If you look at the very bottom of Soundtrap, you'll see it actually has stop, start, play, record buttons at the bottom. And you can click pause there. You can hit stop there. Any of those methods works. Okay, Jill wrote that she is getting an error message. So if you signed up a couple of years ago using an old account, it might not be active anymore. You have to repay for your account every year. If you want to try to create a new account, Jill, what you can do is use a totally different email and sign up for the EDU version for free. That would be one solution. Otherwise, you're definitely more than welcome to watch and play around later, but we're happy to have you no matter what. Victoria just wrote, I have 2 accounts and the one on Safari keeps asking me to pay even though it says it is free for a monthly. Victoria, my suggestion would be if you have Chrome, you can try opening it on Chrome. Sometimes that tends to be a solution. You could also make sure that you have the correct account open. And I'm going to answer one more question and then we're going to kind of move on. So okay, so Sarah wrote, I'm missing something. When it drags, it is gray and won't drop. Could be that you're dragging a track that is not actually part of your loop library. If you're using the free version, sometimes certain tracks don't go into the library. So just make sure that you're using, when you click on the appropriate track, make sure that you're clicking on one that's not just for the paid version. It won't drop in if you're using one that's only for a paid version. And I'll just reiterate this question one more time since John Lejoy just wrote, is there a way to delete tracks? Yes, absolutely. You can delete tracks several different ways. If you click on it, just press the delete button on your computer. Or if you want to remove the entire track completely, you can go over to the left-hand side. In fact, let me see if I can show this to you in 1 second because you might want this later. You can go to the left-hand side of the track and select the buttons right there to delete the entire track. So give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can share this with you. It's being a little bit slow, so I'm going to come back to that question and show you in a minute. So let's move on so that we can kind of take a look at what the next step is. So once you've gone into Soundtrap and you've layered those tracks, okay, so students understand how to at least drag and drop. They have it, it's at least 16 bars, and they've kind of figured out a way to make sure that it sounds like something that might make sense, right? This is the very first assignment. The next assignment I go to builds off of this assignment. So again, I remind my students, does it have at least 4 tracks? Does it last 16 bars? Does it utilize tracks in a way where they enhance one another? In my classroom, I use a lot of checklists and rubrics. So this is a really great way to make sure that students are kind of thinking about their process as they go through. And this is also scaffolding up to some bigger questions of editing. So because this is all scaffolded, if you look at the pictures on your screen right now, you can see that assignment 1 is on the left and assignment 2 is on the right. Each assignment builds off of one another so that by the end of this 3 assignment series, students are actually making a full-fledged song with some automation in it, which is really cool to be able to do that in the equivalent of 3 lessons, which I have done with my students. So let's look at how we turn this first assignment into something a little bit more complex. Now, this is another one of those outside tips that I recommend. I personally use Berkeley Pulse with my students to introduce Forum. And guess what? Today, you are all going to get your very own Berkeley Pulse login. If you do not already have Berkeley Pulse, congratulations. Now you can create your own account and all of your students can create their own account too. So what you see on my screen right now is an additional outside free, totally free resource that you can use with your students. This is one that I use to teach a variety of different elements, including rhythm, melody, and obviously today we're going to be focusing on form since we're creating a song, right? So what I really love about this is that students can do it on their own, and they also have different levels. So if I have a student who's a real beginner, they would obviously start at level 1, and it goes all the way up to level 3. I would say in terms of age level, anywhere from like an older elementary school student all the way up to high school could use this platform really successfully, depending on how you were looking at it. So in Berkeley Pulse, one of their sections is obviously on form, and they break down the introduction. There are videos on every single aspect of form. So in each category, there's about 9 videos that students can watch. And there are flashcards, there are quizzes. Students can take quizzes over and over again to grade themselves. And it's a really great assessment tool, and also something that's not relying on me to help them get the information, right? So students can watch those videos, and it really helps not only for differentiating to different levels of students, but also just to kind of reinforce some basic skills. So when I start composition, this is where I start. We talk about what intro is, what verse is, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, and coda. All right. Yep, the login information, Julio just asked, could you put in the login information? So for Berkeley Pulse, you just create your own login. So whatever your own personal email is, that's what you use, and you create an account, and you can use that with your students, which is really wonderful. All right, the other thing I had mentioned with my students that I use a lot of are checklists and rubrics, but rubrics are a pain. They're a lot of work, and to make a really good one, it takes a lot of time. So here is another offer. So I'm going to go back, and if at any point you want to go back to one of these offers and you didn't get it, or you feel like you didn't get to spend enough time kind of going through it, these are going to be here for you. You can also email me. Again, if for some reason something gets lost and you need another copy, I will just send you every single thing that is on here. So this is a rubric that I've created that I use specifically with assignment number 2. What is really helpful about this rubric is it breaks down into 3 different categories: the overall form of your composition, how you use those tracks, right? Am I using them effectively? Did I not use enough tracks? And finally, it forces for my students to really think about analyzing their own work. The reason why I include some formal analysis in my rubric is because I find that unless they go back and actually deconstruct what they've created, they are often missing things. So they either don't have a chorus, or they've forgotten an outro, or they've forgotten an intro. So having a rubric really helps keep my students on track. I see that Don wrote Berkeley Pulse won't let me create an account. Don, email me after this and we'll figure out why it's not letting you create one. You should be able to definitely do that. Okay, I see Anne just wrote, can you download the individual Berkeley Pulse videos and post in Google Slides within a lesson, or do they need to log into the site? And I'm sure there's many different ways that you could do this. I've never personally done that. I find it useful for my students to log into their own site, but I'm sure that you could figure out a way to do that. There's many different ways. You could take a screen recording if you couldn't just download off the site. So there are definitely tons of ways to do that. So let's move into our second assignment, so that way you guys can get back to playing around in Soundtrap. So if I go back here, this is assignment number 2. Now, I also have an entire video that really goes from beginning to end of creating this assignment for your students. We are not going to watch that entire video. It would be a little bit too long for our time frame. But what is really important is figuring out, okay, I have this basic element in assignment number 1. How do I turn that into an actual song? So let's take a look at our second video. And again, we are not watching the entire thing. Let me just start this from video number 2. Here we go. 341. Okay. I'm going to just fast forward this a little bit.
Let's review form.
There you are. They sound more like they are filling in until the verse repeats, which it does, as verse 2. I hear the moment that the S of X synth drops in as a variation of the first verse, which would make this a verse 2. When you listen to the entire song, it sounds like it's telling one clear story, and so far, there is not an ending. I can't wait to hear the rest of the story. Turning assignment 1 into assignment number 2. So to create assignment number 2, start by going back into Soundtrap and opening up assignment number 1. what you want to do is you want to look at what you already have set up. Depending on what you did in assignment number 1, some of you may already have an intro and maybe even a. Okay, awesome. So we're back. So we're going to go into that same exact platform that we were in. So go into that same track series that you have from assignment number 1, and we're basically building off of this. One of the things that you can do is simply copy and paste, just like you would in a regular Word document or Google Doc. So if you have a section that looks like an intro and you have a section that's a verse, you can literally select the track and copy and paste it to make it the same thing. So I'm going to give us right now about 5 minutes to go into Soundtrap and do that. That'll give us just enough time to touch on automation when we come back from that. So we're going to hold off on some of the other questions that are getting asked, but we're writing them down on this side. So don't think your question's going to get missed. There was a great question on collaboration feature, which we will touch in just about a minute. But you have 5 minutes right now to try to turn your short clip of 16 bars into a full-fledged song. Again, this is a reminder for your song. You should have, let's look at our assignment, making sure that you have at least a verse that repeats and a chorus that repeats plus an intro and outro on either side. So the way to do that is to just drag in some additional loops to kind of fill that gap. So you can see that you have an intro, a verse, a chorus, a verse, a chorus, and an outro. And to do that, again, you just simply copy and paste. So I'm going to give us some time to play back in Soundtrap. Let's see if we can get at least an intro and verse and a chorus out of what we have. And if you don't have time to finish your song, no worries. You can always go and do this later. You can play around as much as you want. But again, these are some of the ways that I get my students to kind of build from knowing nothing on Soundtrap to creating a full-fledged song. So we're bringing this back at 5:52. Okay, and Natalie asked a great question. How do you dub your voice over their composition for feedback? So Natalie, in the video that you saw, I do it using iMovie. So I just simply record it and then I dub my voice in iMovie. If I was actually giving feedback for my students, I'm going to use a feature called the collaboration feature, which somebody else already asked about. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. I actually literally copy and paste the blocks from my rubric directly into their feedback in Soundtrap. So they can read my comment in the Soundtrap site itself and then make any necessary editing changes. Larry asked, did your students use iPads? Does it function well on other mobile devices? Yes, Larry, my students do use iPads. Everything in Soundtrap functions well on an iPad, especially if they're already using Chrome. But the one thing that does not work on an iPad, and we're going to touch on this in assignment number 3, is using automation. Automation has not worked for any of my students on iPads, which is definitely a downer. I found that out the hard way by giving this assignment. But what I did do was make it an editing assignment, so it included additional things beyond just automation. So I will show you how to use some of that. Dominique just said, what? You can put the rubric into the assignment. Dominique, you can copy and paste whatever sections of the rubric you want. So I can literally copy and paste, you got a 4 with all of the descriptors in there directly into their Soundtrap assignment. And that's exactly how I get feedback. It definitely saves time on the teacher's end just to simply copy and paste. Dominique, at the end, if we have a little more time, I will definitely stay behind to talk more about how I use Berkeley Pulse with my students. Since that's not the focus of this presentation, I don't want to go too much into it now. But what I would encourage you to do is at another time, if you want to go play around in Berkeley Pulse and just see some of the different lessons that are in there, I find it really useful. And it really works everywhere from upper elementary all the way up to high school. It has really nice scaffolds built in, so I can do a lot with it. Yes, Christine, I'm going to show you an example of assignment number 2. She just wrote, can I show her an example? Yes, we're going to see that in a second as we move to assignment number 3. So I'm going to give us about 1 more minute to finish up, and then I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like as we go into editing. Victoria just wrote, can you remind me how to move over what I already have? You can again click on any track and drag it wherever you want it to go. So you could select a whole group of tracks, click it and drag it. That's a really great tool. Taylor wrote one question I just want to address about latency. So when students are recording with a click or guide track, the most important thing I can suggest is that they use a wired mic. Whatever microphone it is, Bluetooth microphones will not work. I've had really good results in Soundtrap as long as students are using either just the computer or a wired mic. That in Soundtrap, for me anyway, I haven't experienced latency issues when using a wired mic. However, I absolutely have if you're using a wireless one. It does not work. Okay, so I know there's a bunch of other questions. We definitely will make an effort to get through any ones we miss at the end. That's my reminder to you, but we are going to move forward so that way I can answer Christine's question of what does this actually look like, right? So if we go into our assignment number 2, we'll see this as I show you how we go about editing for assignment number 3. So again, if I look at the picture on the left was an example of assignment number 2. So even just looking at it, if I look on the very left-hand side of the photo, I can see one track is kind of starting the song. I can see that there's some kind of track that's going throughout the song. Spoiler alert, that's a drum track. Kind of like to have my beat throughout. And then I can see other layers of tracks that kind of are alternating. It almost looks like a checkerboard, right? Each set of layered tracks is representing a verse, then a chorus, then a verse, then a chorus, then a verse with an outro. That's what this picture looks like. The difference between what's on the left and what's on the right in this is that the one on the right actually uses automation. So to use automation, I can actually edit the individual track itself even further and give fade-ins, fade-outs within the track, or I can mess around with some of the other aspects of that. So let's go take a look at what this is going to sound like and look like. And again, we don't have a ton of time for us to mess around with this, but I do want you to have at least a sense of what this feature is so you can play around later. So let's go into our last main video so that Christine can see that and the rest of you can see what this looks like when we move them in. And I'm not going to start at the beginning, so let's
learning
move
how
forward.
to edit.
Again, you can use the beginning of this for your students, but we are almost there. Yay!
Now that you've made all of your necessary edits and you've checked your form, you're ready for automation. Select a track that you want to automate. Click on the automation icon and select your choice of automation. Practice adding the automation to your track by selecting points and clicking and dragging to move them. You can always move them later or delete it if you don't like. When you are done, edit other sections by adding fade-outs and fade-ins, soloing tracks, muting tracks, or adjusting overall track volume. Let's listen. By adding automation in the anthem beat 1 kick, I went from making the drums sound much more muffled and deeper to sounding way brighter and louder. used.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to just bring it back. That was just an overview of what automation does and what it looks like. Again, that video is much longer, so you can feel free to go back and watch the entire video at any time. It definitely has a big chunk that's leading up to that 4 minutes beforehand. But I'm going to ask you just to jump into your own Soundtrap song right now and locate that automation button. So you can just click on it and find where it is. It looks like that sideways letter N. You would not see it if you're on an iPad. So if you're on an iPad, what you can do to kind of mess around with your tracks a little bit is if you select the track itself and click on it, at the top right and left-hand corners of that track, there's a little tiny little circle. If you click the circle and slide it, you'll end up either creating a decrescendo at the end, or if you want to do a fade in the beginning, you can slide it the other way, and that'll create a fade in as well. Heinz row, I don't see it. Just edit at the top of the track. Is that it? That is definitely one way to do it if you're on an iPad, Heinz. I hope I said your name right. If not, though, if you're at the actual track, the last box in the track has the automation button itself. Okay, so I just want to move really quickly since we're really at the very, very end of wrapping up so that we get through a couple of the other things. You will all have access to all of the slides that are in here, so we're not going to spend a ton of time going through each individual one, but I do want you to know some of the other free things that you're going to get. So in addition to these 3 assignments, which scaffold and build up to your final project of your song and all the resources that go with them, including the videos, you are also going to get some other projects. So this is a great one for sampling songs. What I will tell you is make sure you do this in a legal way. So my students did a holiday parody. What they did was they sampled different sections of common Christmas songs or holiday songs, whatever they chose to do. We actually had some Halloween ones in there, which were pretty funny. And in that, they got to layer those different samples to create something totally new and different. So I highly recommend, here's some legal stuff. You can go back and read it later, but make sure you don't do anything illegal with your students. But yes, you can create a parody. So this was one of the ways that I did that. Okay, there's also some specific examples of what this looks like, as well as a guide video included. You will all get all of these resources at the end of the presentation. This is what it looked like, and here's the final assignment. So again, they needed to have an instrumental break, some meaningful, funny words, sound effects, and a solid, strong beat. This was also when my students got to use the collaboration feature. So this is the last big thing I have to touch on. In Soundtrap, the best part of Soundtrap is that you can collaborate with someone else and they can work on the same song. It's how I personally get my choir members all singing the same things and recording different tracks. You can go in and have multiple people work on the exact same song simultaneously, but you do have to kind of keep refreshing as you go. So if I wanted to work with a partner, this is a great way to have students doing group work during remote learning. And the button for that is that little green circle directly below the purple loop icon. The last thing I'm just going to add is in these PowerPoints, we also have some other assignments. So if you want students getting comfortable using their voice, there's a podcast assignment in here that's included, just getting them comfortable on talking about a topic of their choice. And there are also other assignments in here. Here's another one on getting them to talk about social justice issues. And the last assignment in here is one of my favorites. I had my students score an animated short. We don't have enough time to watch the clip right now, but it will be included in some of the resources at the end. And anything you don't have, feel free to email me. I'll send it directly out to you. Students actually scored a 30-second animated short. So I will leave that for anybody who wants to kind of stay around at the end. Okay, again, here's another rubric that's also there. And there are some other perspectives you can read a little bit more about in yours, looking at some of the challenges that can be difficult, especially with collaboration. It can be hard to work with their peers. That takes a little bit of extra time figuring that out for students. For me, one of the biggest challenges was just figuring out how everything worked slightly differently on a different device, and I had a little bit of time learning that. Okay, and I'm going to just end this here. If you have any other questions, because I know that there have been a bunch in the chat and we couldn't get to quite all of them, you can email me at plicktoCatherine@gmail.com. And the website's already included in the chat. Modern Band Summit is there for all presentations. If there's anything that we missed that you want to ask me about that's a really burning desire, I'm happy to go back over. Heinz said assignment number 6. That was one of the other podcast assignments. That was a social justice issue one that I let students choose. And if if there's a little bit of extra time, can I just ask somebody who's in the room with me? I'm going by the clock on here. I have 2:57. So I'm going to just go back through some of the burning questions that I saw at the end. So that way you can have that. Yes, Russell asked a great question. He said, where is the curriculum map? So I can't get to that without, oh, here it is. Awesome. So voila. Here is the curriculum map for Russell and everybody else who is here. In the curriculum map itself, it actually lays out in sequence all of the lessons I just kind of went over. If you want to go back and read any of those lessons in a more detailed way, you're absolutely able to. You can go through the PowerPoint as much as you want. I encourage you to do that. I actually included way too much information in the PowerPoint intentionally. Normally I don't do that, but I wanted you to have a bunch of different lessons so you didn't even have to think about planning like, how am I going to roll this out with students? So you literally have a solid 6 months of lessons under your belt as of this moment. Natalie asked, where again is the automation icon? So Natalie, it depends on the device you're on, whether or not you have it. It also might depend on your child version, but the automation icon is on the individual track itself, and it looks like a sideways N. Gregory Gatewood just said, hi Gregory, he just said, where's the PowerPoint? The PowerPoint is going to be in all of the resources that LKR has. If you go to Modern Band Summit, if you need anything else in another way, like you just want it in a one-stop shop place and want to email me, I will just add you to my Soundtrap folder. I have a huge Soundtrap folder with tons of stuff in it. You are more than welcome to be there.
Thank you so much, Katie. I just want to let you know that you did a great job. And if anyone has any more questions, they can email Katie at tlicktacatherine@gmail.com. Once again, all of the presentations will be shared on the Modern Band Summit website.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I'm just going to get a couple other ones. So Don wrote, where are the videos to show kids? So Don, all of the videos are on YouTube. They're unlisted, but all of the links work. So if you want to email me, I can send you a link and you can use them as much as you want. All of the videos are there and up, ready to go. And Gregory Gatewood, you wrote, yay, please, thank you. Just send me your email, Greg. You know where I live. All right. And again, anybody who wants anything, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to share. All right, and I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for being such wonderful participants. I know that went really fast, but thank you for being so fabulous and having such a great session.